Welcome back to Risky Business, our podcast about making better decisions. Today on the show, we'll be talking about Anna, as she likes to be known, Delvey, as I will be calling her, Anna Sorokin, a con artist, convicted con artist who has found her way to Dancing with the Stars this week.
And after we talk about this con artist that I've never heard of, we'll talk about a different type of con politics.
All right, let's do it. I'm excited to get started. So first up, Nate, are you really, were you just like hamming it up a tiny bit for the podcast, or do you really not know who Anna Delvey is?
I'm a man of a medium number of interests, right? I know about poker. I know about several of the sports quite well, right? I know about restaurants. I know about Curb Your Enthusiasm. I know a little bit about mid-century modern architecture. I do not know who the fuck this person is.
That was a curveball. I love that. I love that you just kind of threw in mid-century modern architecture. Amazing. All right. So let's give a little primer on Anna. And I won't go. I'm assuming that most of our listeners do know who she is, but I'll give you the rundown. So first of all, her name is not Anna Delvey, and I'm actually really pissed that in absolutely every single media source she's called Anna Delvey, which is her con artist name. Her actual name is Anna Sorokin. Bitches from Moscow, not an heiress from Germany, the way that she has always portrayed herself to be. But she is someone who is a grifter, who ended up scamming New York high society out of hundreds of thousands of dollars, including fraudulent bank loans and all of these things predicated on her being an heiress to this fortune. She said that she was going to start this cultural arts club that was going to be, Nate, you know a little bit about art. So she was going to be exhibiting people like Cindy Sherman, right? So she threw the big guns at it. She said, I've got all this money and we're gonna have a private members only club. We're gonna have Cindy Sherman exhibits. I mean, we're gonna have the best restaurant in New York. This is gonna be amazing. She weaseled her way into New York society by very clever use of Instagram, social media, connecting herself to the highest kind of social cachet people. And she befriended this woman, Rachel Williams, who at that point was a photo editor, I believe. I might be getting her title wrong at Vanity Fair, but she was a photographer, photo editor person there. And Rachel was the one who ended up bringing her down because she went on a trip with her to Morocco that Anna said was part of kind of this whole thing that she was doing to raise money for the foundation. And Rachel ended up getting saddled with the bill, $62,000, which was more than her annual salary. And she was not able to get this money back from Anna. She got pissed. She went to the police, and then Anna's house of cards unraveled. She was convicted. She served time. When she was released from Rikers, she ended up overstaying her visa, was put back into jail, and is now out again and back in the news because last week, Dancing with the Stars decided to make the lovely decision of having Anna Sorokin on their show.
I did watch Anna. In preparation the performance. I thought that was mediocre, but again, I'm not
very mediocre. It was very mediocre.
Uninspired. You have your moment in the 15 minutes of fame, your 14th out of 15th minute. Use it better. Anna Sorokin was her name. But
yes,
Maria,
and
how do you feel about this decision by Dancing with the Stars?
How do
made
I
by
really
my former
feel?
employer, ABC News.
I mean, I think it's horrific. I do not think that con artists deserve to be given that sort of a platform. People are like, oh, she deserves a second chance. Absolutely fucking not. I have dealt with so many con artists over the years, and they do not go straight. She has expressed zero remorse. In fact, the opposite. She said, I am not sorry for anything I've done. She feels like she completely deserves it. She has profited off of her story. And I understand that networks are out there to make profit and to make some money, but like, give me a break. Moscow skeezy con artist, like there are better people to give your platform to. And I'm begging everyone listening and I'm begging the media to stop calling her Anna Delvey. This is not respect for something that, oh, this is a name that she wants to be called by. No, absolutely not. It's like calling Christian Gerheiritzer Clark Rockefeller, right? The dude's a murderer. He just happened to want to be known as Clark Rockefeller. Seriously, are we doing this? Are we calling them by their chosen con name under which they defrauded people and like completely assumed a new identity because they fucking felt like it? I have zero sympathy for her. I have zero, just absolutely zero thoughts that she's ever going to go straight. Do we think Billy McFarland is going to have a really nice new venture that we should all invest in?
What would you say the cultural role of Dancing with the Stars is? Because they've had it on other people who have had, various controversy or scandals. Former White House press secretary Sean Spicer was a guest. Yeah. Ryan Lochte had a very minor scandal where involving some gas station and was on the show. Paula Deen is a Southern celebrity chef who maybe used some racial words that you wouldn't want to use so much. And she was on the show. So why does ABC News feel the need to rehabilitate these people who are like not even like that interesting or noteworthy?
Yeah. People have been fascinated with con artists, and oftentimes, especially con artists like Anna Sorokin, who are people who kind of go for the upper echelons of society, right? Like the high society glamour, crime, like Clark Rockefeller, by the way, who I mentioned, Christian. They are just media fodder because, first of all, like they're charismatic, they're appealing, all this stuff, but also they end up conning people who they victim blame them. They have less sympathy for.
Shouldn't you get shouldn't you have something where like at any given time, like one man and one woman con artists are permitted to just continue being con artists because they're so good at it? I want to create some incentive.
That has happened though. Like you don't actually have to create that incentive. So in The Confidence Game, which was the book I wrote about con artists, Ferdinand Waldo Demara, who's known as the Great Imposter, who had ended up having this biography written about him, The Great Imposter, and then a movie made where Tony Curtis starred as him. He became ridiculously recognizable because he's like over, 6 foot, I don't remember, 6'4" or something like that, like very massive, like huge guy, just someone who you would instantly recognize. He doesn't have, there are some faces that like look like Everyman. He does not look like Everyman. And he was on every single TV outlet, Johnny Carson, he went on Groucho Marx's show. Like he was on everything. And so you would think that he would need some sort of program to be allowed to con again because everyone would know he's a con artist. Turns out he didn't need anything like that because he ended up running and continuing to con long after that. So he had every opportunity to go straight. He was given all of this money, all of this stuff, but he just loved conning too much. So even after all this media attention, he just switched his con. And so he ended up conning multiple people for multiple decades after this, saying, and the con was, I've gone straight, I'm repentant, like you're the one person who understands me. Let's I really want to like prove that I'm a good reformed person now. And then he would like take them for all they were worth. And he was so good at it that he kept doing it over and over and over. So con artists do not need any help. And the best con artists, Nate, you and I have no idea who the fuck they are because unlike Anna, they have not been caught. There are probably imposters out there in the world right now. We talked briefly, I think, on this show about Theranos at some point. There are more Elizabeth Holmeses out there. There are more Theranoses out there that are getting millions of dollars from venture capital in Silicon Valley. Like, we don't have a problem with con artists not getting a second shot at the con. Even Billy McFarland, who I just mentioned, he tried Fire Festival too, and all sorts of other lovely things. So they you can't get them down.
I'm reading a little bit about P.T. Barnum, actually, in this book. Have you read the
Oh,
book, The 48 Laws of Power?
I
Um,
have. Yes.
it's a very interesting book. Maybe we'll have a little mini segment on it one day. It's kind of a slightly evil, very Machiavellian book, too.
Yes, it is.
But it's talking about some of the ambiguities of someone like P.T. Barnum, who, would reject the label of being a con artist. I haven't read that much about him, but eventually kind of, became a member of the House of Representatives or something in Connecticut and was kind of rehabilitated into somewhat polite society, I guess. But yeah, it is a spectrum, I guess, right? Or is that not correct?
No, I mean, I think there's a spectrum, but I don't think P.T. Barnum is a con artist, right?
Okay.
Like I think that there's a very like he sold deception, right? He's a circus owner who like this was everyone knew exactly what he was doing. I think that there are people who act in good faith and in bad faith, but not all bad faith actors are con artists. And I think that it is a spectrum, but there's a pretty clear demarcation point between con artist and not, which is your intention to take advantage of people for your own personal benefit without their awareness. Obviously, you mentioned Machiavellian, so it is incredibly Machiavellian, and in fact, out of the dark triad of traits that con artists often have, so that's psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism. Psychopathy is the least common, just because it's the least common in society. Narcissism is kind of this not just this sense of aggrandized self, but also this sense of I deserve, right? So like I deserve all of this, so I'm not doing anything wrong. Like I'm just taking what is mine, what I deserve. And then there's the one that con artists most commonly have. In fact, I would argue that you cannot be a successful con artist without this, and that's Machiavellianism, which is the ability to get people to do what you want them to do, but they think it's their own idea, right? So you're very good at kind of planting the seeds in their mind that they think, oh, this is what I should do, but really it's coming from you and it's exactly what you want. So you manipulate them, but you're not seen as manipulative. You're seen as charismatic, which is Machiavelli's whole thing. And so that intent to knowingly deceive, to take advantage of other people's confidence in you is what makes a con artist.
What about a politician?
So it depends. So within every single profession, you'll find con artists. But to say that all politicians are con artists is to completely dilute the term so that it's meaningless. So if you're a politician who does normal politician things, which is, you might exaggerate, right? Like that like you probably won't be able to deliver on all these promises. You kind of give the strongest case argument for all of them, but you truly believe that you're going to make the world a better place, right? That's why you got into politics. Your heart's in the right place. Like you're not trying to completely deceive someone, and you're not saying something like, "Oh, like I promise you know, to protect abortion at all costs," and then secretly you're anti-abortion and trying to stack the court to reverse Roe v. Wade, right? So you're not a con artist because you actually you're trying to make the world a better place. You believe that you're doing it, and to the best of your ability, you're kind of advancing that message. Now, if you actually if there's a mismatch between your beliefs and what you're doing, if you're doing it in a cynical way, if you're misleading, knowingly misleading, saying one thing while you're going to do another, or you don't fucking care because you don't care if abortion's protected or not protected as long as you remain in power, right? You're motivated by control. You're motivated by power, which, by the way, is the single biggest motivation of all con artists. It's not money, it's control. It's power. It's affecting other people and influencing other people. If you're that, then you're a politician who also happens to be a con artist. And there are both, right? And I think that there is a big difference. And you have a spectrum, by the way, of, true believer politicians, right? Like you've got the Bernie Sanderses of the world, who I think is probably pretty far on the true believer spectrum. And then you have the people who are, much more pragmatic, who do what needs to be done, who kind of get down and dirty, but they still kind of believe what you want. And on the other side, I'm just going to say his name. Like you've got the Donald Trumps who've been convicted of fraud. Like I used to have to say that he was an alleged con artist. I don't have to say alleged anymore. Like, shit's been proven in court. He is a con artist.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I don't know. They should have done the election case. That
Well,
case
I'm
is
not
a
even
lot more.
talking about the I'm not even talking about the election case. I'm talking about
I
real
know.
estate fraud.
Yeah.
Like, that's all you need. All you need is one.
To what extent do people feel like they're in on the joke with the con artist?
They're not. So I think that
Well, with Trump, though, here's what I'm pushing. With Trump, I think people feel like he's on my side, and you take
yeah,
him.
well, that no, no, no,
You don't
but
take
that's
him
the thing.
literally.
That's the thing, though. But they don't think they're in on the joke. Like, they actually believe, right? Like, they don't understand that they're victims of con artists. I think that people who are Trump supporters are victims of a con artist, and they just really don't see that. They see Trump as on their side. They see him as a true believer. And so they're willing to discount red flags, evidence. It doesn't matter. And this happens over and over and over. Let's put Trump aside for a second and just look at a pattern that happens within con artists throughout history, which is that when you have, and this is rare, by the way, because so many con artists can kind of skirt the laws, get away with it. But in those cases when there's incontrovertible evidence, when they're actually tried in court and proven guilty, you often have the case where their biggest victims don't believe it and think it's a big government conspiracy, legal conspiracy, whatnot against them. And it's just mind-boggling. And then you talk to them. I've talked to hundreds of victims of con artists. I can give them all the receipts, right? I can show them everything. I can be like, hey, this pastor who you think, is the second coming of the Lord and is just like the best thing that has ever happened to your community. The money that you donated for a new church, he spent gambling away in Las Vegas. This is not a hypothetical. This actually happened. And the person will be like, no, this is a fake receipt. This is not true. He didn't take this flight. He's not a gambler. Like, he doesn't believe in it. And even if he did, and then it was for a reason, and he, like, the good Lord told him that he was going to make more money for our church, right? So they can just they just do all these mental jumping jacks. The cognitive dissonance is so large that the dissonance reduction, which is what we do to kind of bring down that cognitive dissonance and bring our internal thoughts about what reality should be like in line with what we're seeing, is just so huge that basically these people are beyond reach. This is why the single best victim of a con artist is someone who's been conned before, because they are so good at rationalizing away the fact that they've been conned that they're very easy to take advantage of again, because that's easier to them than admitting that they've been the victim of this horrible long con.
Maria, you want to talk some politics?
I think we started talking politics
Yeah.
without meaning to, Nate. So yes, let's take a break from Anna Sorokin.
Yeah, Maria, let me just push. I think Trump's a tricky case, right? I mean, because for one thing, the biggest con he's trying to pull off is the stolen election claims, right? On the other hand, isn't he just promising to deliver cultural backlash to progressive elites and lower taxes for wealthy business owners?
I think that if we actually
And won't he actually deliver those things?
I don't think so. And I think if we parse his different messages to different groups of people, we will see that he has said, and I actually believe that there are YouTube compilations of this. He's given the absolute polar opposite message to different groups of people, depending on who he's trying to appeal to at the moment. So he's been like the one that I've already talked about. He's been both pro and anti-abortion, depending on the day that you get him, even one day apart. So, like, let's just leave it at that. This is not someone who you can trust to have a single opinion.
It's just politics.
It's
when I go and give
when I'm
doing
politics.
a book tour event, I'll do some with Ben Shapiro. I'm messaging the book very differently than when I'm at the liberal book fair in Seattle. I'll tell you that much.
That's fine. You can use different messaging, but do you fundamentally change your meaning and say, actually, you know what? The river sucks and the village is where all the smartest things in the world are.
Kamala Harris ran on a very left of center platform in 2019. Was that a con?
There are matters of degree, and then there are complete just saying polar opposite things one day apart. And I think you're being a little disingenuous just to push back a little bit. But I think
I
that
think I
was
know more about what I get in the Trump administration than the Harris administration. It
that
might
that
not
might be
exactly
true.
match what Trump says, but like
But that's the key.
implicitly,
That's the key, right? This is what we were going back to with con artists. Do they believe what they're saying, or are they using it as a means to a personal end to take advantage of other people to gain power for themselves? And that is all they care about in the end is power and control. They
yeah,
don't give a
like
fuck about other people or about the world. I do not believe that that is true of all politicians. I absolutely believe that that is true of Donald Trump. We have good evidence for it. And with your book, yeah, sure, you're going to change messaging. You're going to not push on certain points to certain audiences, but you're not going to change your thesis. I
Joe
should hope not.
Biden.
But Nate, let me ask you a question. If I were to, when you're talking to different audiences about what your polls say, do you manipulate your polls? Do you take certain
I do
do you
not.
take
No.
certain do you take certain surveys out? Do you weight them differently so that your message changes so that you're more appealing to your audience and you say Kamala's ahead and then 2 hours later without any new polls coming out, you say, oh, no, I think Donald Trump is going to win. Do you do that?
I do not do that. No.
Donald Trump would do that. That is the difference between a con artist and a non-con artist. I rest my case. We are going to move on to
I
the
do
next
not.
case.
I think out of all the dimensions by which you can criticize Trump, and there are many, like I'm not sure that's a dimension where he stands out particularly relative to the ability to tell groups slightly contradictory things
Not
that
slightly
are.
contradictory. This is not a question of degree. This is just a question
I mean,
of
Harris said she
substance.
wanted to ban fracking, and now she doesn't anymore, and has offered no reason for that change
There
apart
are
from political expediency.
Sure, that happens, and that happens with all politicians. But like I said, if we just label all politicians con artists, that label loses all meaning.
I'm
So
just,
we need to have
right
it is a
now,
continuum, as we started off this segment by saying, right? It's shades of gray. It's not black and white, but there are dividing lines. And unless you want to label every single politician in history, by the way, including Bernie Sanders as a con artist, then
I
then
think
we have
Bernie
to
is one of the
actually.
least conny politicians out
Exactly.
there.
That's why I said, but then we didn't include him because he's done conny things in the past. But unless we do that, in which case the word con artist completely gets deprived of all meaning, we have to start making certain distinctions along that continuum.
47% of the country is going to vote for Trump. I'm
I
trying to
know that.
explain. I'm
I
trying to
know that
explain what
because
they think.
they're victims of a con artist.
Uh,
And they will never be persuaded otherwise because victims of con artists will stay victims and will always think that the person that they're following is not a con artist.
for many
They are
people,
true believers.
it's in their narrow self-interest to vote for Trump.
Sure. And then there are those people who are
That their
cynical.
position's elevated, and
Absolutely. Absolutely. Then there are those cynical piece of shit human beings. Yeah, that I'm just gonna who vote for Trump just because of cynical self-interest and don't give a fuck what happens to the rest of the world and the rest of the country. Those people also exist.
I
Sorry,
disagree with that
listeners.
characterization. First of all, I
So
hope we have some Trump listeners. No, I
that's
disagree
fine.
with that.
That's fine.
I think
Okay.
I don't think it's a bad thing if people vote in terms of their narrow self-interest. I think that's a part of a political economy that can be healthy. I think sometimes Trump understands that you do want to appeal to people's sense of identity, and people aren't doing some Cartesian expected value calculation, right? About the impact of climate change or whatnot.
No, I think that that's right, but I think that there are people who are completely cynical and who have this sort of very narrow lens of what's better for my bottom line. I don't give a fuck what happens to anyone else in the world except for me, and I'm going to vote for the person who makes that better. And that there's certainly, that's fine. There are psychopaths in the world. Do I think that makes them good people? Do I think that that makes them some, no, I don't. I
What if
actually,
what if
I
Kamala Harris
don't.
campaigned on a platform to ban poker? Would you vote for Trump?
No,
I would. I would.
I absolutely would not.
Oh, yeah, I would.
I would absolutely still vote for
If it
Kamala
affected
Harris
that,
because in my mind, sure, I'm a poker player, but like if we're talking about one person says they're going to ban online poker and the other person says they're going to do a lot worse to the world, like, all right, if you want to play online poker, you can go to Canada.
I think, I mean, there's a long discussion about this in my book, right? I think if you're not protecting your self-interest, you wind up getting stumped on in the long run. I think that's what the game theory equilibrium is that if you're not willing to defend your self-interest, then you get trampled.
But it's not black and white, right? Like, I think being a single issue voter, like poker, is a really stupid single issue to vote on, just like it would be a really stupid single issue, to vote on, like on crypto or something, like where only one thing matters to you, because the world is much more complicated. And so you have to actually just try to figure out of this constellation of policies, which future is going to be a better future for me, and for everyone else. And unless you think that you are, wealthy enough and insulated enough that you'll be kind of okay no matter what, like if the world burns, you'll still be fine, which I think is also kind of
No, I
deluded.
would just say that if Kamala Harris were to say, I want to ban poker, I would feel targeted as a poker player. And clearly this is a community that wouldn't be interested in the votes of people like me. So why would I want to be in their coalition?
But you wouldn't then go and vote for Trump.
Yes, I would. If Kamala Harris campaigned on a platform to ban all forms of poker, I would vote for Donald Trump. Or maybe I'd vote libertarian or something.
Well, those are two very different things.
Sort of, but yeah, I would want Harris to lose, right? Like, I think a lot of people have it in their rational, maybe
but
perhaps.
That's what I was trying to say. I don't actually think it's rational, because if the payoff matrix is such that, okay, no poker, but end of the world, poker, no poker, no poker, but world is fine, or poker and kind of end of the world in a lot of different ways, and civil war, then your EV matrix is completely different. And that one reason why you voted for the other candidate is completely invalidated if you're rational. The rational thing is you have to look at the total of the payoff matrix, and then you vote for the one with the highest total. And unless poker outweighs everything else, and poker's weighted at 100,000, and if there's no poker, then nothing else matters, then I don't actually see that payoff matrix is necessarily going to be.
But I'm not trying to calculate the EV I'm trying to calculate the EV for me.
For you. Nate. I understand.
And I think
but if society goes to hell and the world burns down and there's a civil war and you, Nate, get murdered because, you were right, then you don't care if you were playing poker when you got murdered, right?
Okay.
Like,
I think we need to more rigorously assess those risks then, right?
Yeah.
Like, let me make a distinction. So Trump recently, I guess, changed his stance or flip-flop because he passed a policy during his tenure to limit the state and local tax deduction, SALT. If you live and own property in New York State, you probably pay a lot of combined taxes between the city and the state and property bills. So Trump has said that he's interested in unlocking this deduction where you can claim unlimited amounts and not just 10K. Trump, by the way, is responsible for the bill that introduced this deduction in the first place, so he might not be trustworthy there. But if I believed him and narrowly had self-interest, then the SALT cap would be something that affected my bottom line a fair bit. So if I were voting purely selfishly, that's probably pretty tangible, right? Something that affects me directly. Now, I'm voting for Harris. I would not vote for Trump on that basis because probably I weight things that happen to me at like some multiple of good for the world, right? But that wouldn't outweigh. If Harris and Democrats were to outlaw poker, my response would be, fuck you. I am clearly not a person that you care about. I'm clearly not a person, you don't see the world in a way that I see the world. And if you think this thing is bad, I think that's a moral obligation to vote against people who want to ban poker.
I think if you actually listen to yourself out of context, you will see that is such an emotional response. You are doing something that
it's a rational response.
No,
it's rational.
It's completely emotional.
Deterrence and reciprocity are important in game theory.
Sure, but fuck you because you did this is not an appropriate response.
Actually, the whole basis of deterrence theory is the emotional response. It's the desire for revenge.
Of
And that's
course. However, I think that you just need to realize that rational cannot be based on an issue like poker, right? Because you need to have, I know you're trying to make a very strong case for a point and you're kind of pushing it to the
I
extreme, but
I'm
it's
saying like,
not but
have you
that's
done
not a rational
have you done a
extreme.
complete expected value calculation of Harris versus Trump?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
And
I
I
mean,
never said I have. I have no, I don't know. I would need, yeah, I could go down the line, but there are certain things and certain risks that I actually believe are very big risks that I know are much higher with Trump. And so I don't feel like I actually have to sit down and do an expected value calculation because there are certain existential risks, like AI, by the way, that I think would be much higher under Trump. And
so you can
you are the person, Nate, by the way, who convinced me that I should be much more worried about AI than I was. So your
I
P doom was much higher than mine. I think that what Trump does to the environment is worrisome. Trump as an existential risk to females who are facing pregnancies that might not be viable. We know multiple women who have lost their lives because they couldn't get abortion. We see kind of it on an individual level. I think there are many more existential risks when you have a candidate like Donald Trump
I
than
think
with
that
Kamala
term is
Harris.
being so if you consulted, let's say that you had a super intelligent chat GPT, right? That was possessed of all the knowledge that we're capable of having. We can't control every contingency, but on a probabilistic basis, right? And I asked it, what are the chances that there's more net utility created considering all these things with Harris than under Trump, right? I would not be a Harris voter. I would not be 100% confident
I have no
that it would
idea.
say Harris, maybe 70-30. I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of complicated factors here, right? There's a big margin of error.
Sure.
There are also knockoff effects and what happens to future elections and things like that.
Absolutely.
I do know
Absolutely.
that if you're fucking me over with this hypothetical poker example, that I know, right? And I think it's like a reasonable heuristic to weigh things that clearly indicate that you're part of the out group. And this is part of Democrats' problem is that if this is decline versus 4 years ago. But Democrats have this thing, particularly progressives, where if you're not aligned with them on everything, then you are treated like some deplorable monster.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And a lot of
And that
more
should not
friends
be
who
the
are voting
case,
for.
by the way. That should absolutely not be the case.
I think Democrats underrate how many votes they lose because they're annoying.
Yeah. And they are annoying. And I hate the holier than thou attitude. And I hate the people who have this whole blanket, like, if you disagree with me on X, then, then that's it. Like, I'm done. I completely agree with you. And the good news is nowhere has Kamala Harris even suggested that she was going to ban poker. So poker players, you can be happy. I'm happy. I would obviously be completely miserable and really upset if that were to ever happen. Because as I said, I love poker and I think it's such a force for good in society. But luckily, this was all a hypothetical example, and poker is in no danger of getting banned. So let's be grateful for that. Nate, you want to give us a little bit of an update of what has happened since we spoke last Tuesday? Have there been new polls, new data? What's on your mind? What are you seeing? How's the race looking?
So Kamala Harris has gained in the neighborhood of 1 percentage point since the debate, which might not seem like a big deal, but actually is, given that the last two elections basically came down to 1 point or so. And moreover, it's been a little bit more than that in Pennsylvania, which is the most important tipping point state. So as a result, if you may remember, the Silver Bilton model had Trump a little bit ahead for a bit. Now it's 50-50.
Yep.
Look, your poker players today, it's 54-46 Harris. If you want to be on the pocket jacks versus ace king suited, you'd rather have the jacks, which win more than half the time. But about the closest election that we've seen, polls within 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 swing states are within 2.5 points. If you had the election today, then Harris is ahead in states totaling 276 electoral
That's
votes.
crazy.
Yeah.
Like that's
Now,
incredibly close. And you said 7.5, by the way, in your update because you had a
so
half
Florida
state.
is this high risk, high reward state where if you win
Right.
Florida, it's 30 electoral votes and that's game over for Trump.
But it's
And it's gotten
probably
a little closer, but Florida's a little
still
bit of a
quite
tease.
unlikely, right?
Um, but no, so 276 is if Harris holds the blue wall states
Hmm.
of Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, plus Nevada.
Hmm.
Um, now
Congratulations.
if she doesn't win Nevada, she's at 270, and you need 269 to win. So
Okay,
she
so
wins by one.
without Nevada, she wins by one. Okay. But
If
that's insane. That's
if
insane.
she wins the
Right.
second congressional district in Nebraska, which is why I'm long-windedly getting into this.
Yeah, let's talk about that because how many states are there? Maine, Nebraska, right?
There are two states. So in Maine, there is one district, the rural second district, home to Acadia National Park and some of the
It's
most
beautiful.
beautiful coastline in the Americas, but also home to a
This
logging
episode
industry
is
and
sponsored by the state of Maine.
sponsored by Maine Second District, but also home to logging communities, weird French American Acadian shit. I don't even know what goes on up there. They're speaking France in parts of Maine, right? Fishermen. I don't know, Maine's an interesting state, right?
It is, yeah.
It's not very religious, but you can still get some kind of rednecky behavior for sure. I love Maine, but it's an interesting state.
Yeah.
So Trump is expected to win that one district in Maine, that rural one, whereas Kamala Harris is expected to win Omaha, Nebraska, basically. That's the correct district for Omaha and its suburbs. So those offset. The GOP wanted to change this law in Nebraska. They've been trying it, which was kind of sleazy. Because the campaign's already begun, strategy has already been involved for campaigning in Omaha and running ads there and things like that. It's, by the way, too late for Democrats to reciprocate in Maine. But they lacked the votes to do this. So they were trying to change the rules in a way that I thought was very dirty pool. But as a result of not doing that, this 270 to 268 map still works for Harris, provided she actually does win the Nebraska district. And by the way, there's also this thing with faithless electors where some years, some electors in the Electoral College, it's actually a group of people, don't vote for the candidate they're pledged to vote for.
How many times has that happened in history?
It hasn't swung an election, but like in 2016, some people were so fed up with the Trump-Clinton election that there were quite a few faithless electors, not enough to like cost Trump the election, but there were some defectors for sure.
Is that the only election? I'm genuinely asking. I actually don't know.
There's often there was someone who voted for John Edwards instead of John Kerry in 2004.
So
there's often one or two.
It's rare, but it happens, and it's never been decisive. Is what you're saying?
No, but if it's 270,
right?
Then if any of some of them are bound, right? But like if it's 270, then and some states are cracking down on this. If it's 270, then that means there are 269 or 270 people that could change history by refusing to cast their vote as their pledge. So it's a little bit of a, we've overused the term existential risk in this episode, but it can.
No. I think that makes sense though in this particular case. If we're looking at an election that could be that close, that could come down to 270 versus 268, then we are talking about that sort of thing. By the way, I'm kind of curious to hear your take on this. Do you think that the Maine Nebraska model is a good one? Do you think that do you think it's good to split the electoral votes? And do you see any other states potentially going that direction? I'm just curious what your
I think it's more likely that what'll happen is that because Nebraska threatened to rescind this, it wouldn't surprise me if Maine preemptively rescinds their system. And then look, these are weird cases where they kind of offset one another. In general, no, I think it's bad when you have different states with different rules. I think it's a slippery slope to, for a while, Pennsylvania wanted to allocate its delegates proportionately, for example. I think you want consistent rules. The Maine Nebraska thing is pretty unlikely to swing election because they offset. But yeah, and by the way, it's also giving more power to redistricting, which is how districts are drawn, which in many states is a very partisan process.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
puts huge stakes into this once every 10-year process. The Supreme Court has ruled that partisan gerrymandering is legal within certain boundaries. Probably will not change under the Roberts Court. And so, yeah, I would not want to give the redistricting process even more power.
By the way, since you keep saying that they're balancing each other, let me bring our episode full circle. We started off talking about Anna Sorokin, and you said you'd never heard of her. However, there are certain things that you have heard of, like Curb Your Enthusiasm. So I just want to bring Curb back here. There was an episode last season where Larry David is standing in line to vote, and it's a really long line, and it's hot outside, and he asks the gentleman in front of him who he's voting for. They're voting for the opposite party's candidates, and he asks if he wants to leave the line with him so that they both do not vote and they offset each other. They don't have to wait in line. The guy agrees. They both leave. Larry David's candidate ends up losing the election by 1 vote. And then it comes out that someone saw him leaving the line and not voting. And so I just wanted to bring this into our discussion because it's what I keep thinking about when you say they offset each other. Because by the way, there is kind of that logic, and some people do kind of do that, and they don't vote, and they find someone else who agrees not to vote, who's voting in the opposite direction.
Yeah, in like 2004, there was some Nader thing where you trade your Nader vote in a safe state for a carry vote in a swing state or something. A memory hold all this stuff.
Anyway, Curb Your Enthusiasm taught us that you should be very wary of doing this because your candidate might lose by 1 vote.
I swayed an election by like 19 votes, actually.
Really?
Yeah, so I am, because I am strategic with my voting, I'm a registered Republican, because you have a lot of influence if you're a registered Republican in Chelsea, Manhattan, which is a very blue place. So 2016, I registered as a Republican to vote against Donald Trump. The candidate who was most viable at that point was John Kasich. So I voted for Kasich, and Kasich won my congressional district by, I think, 19 votes or something.
Nice.
And therefore won an extra delegate to the Republican convention. So
there you go.
Me and 19 other Chelseaites cost Trump a delegate.
All right.
That's a lot of mileage.
It is. It is a lot of mileage. I think that's how strategic voting should be done. Kudos.
Yeah, Maria, I think let's leave it there. I mean, it's wound up being a lot of politics.
It did.
I think I need a decompression.
I need a decompression politics break. I love you, and I respect all of your opinions. And let's go grab a drink and not talk politics.